Welcome into episode 325 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Yet again, another off-season podcast coming your way. Bridget and Scott, we have the Stanley Cup Finals, which the Panthers are off to a 2-0 series lead over the Oilers. We'll get into that. Locally, the Celtics are also up 2-0 in their series in the NBA Finals. But then again, obviously, we know our lane, so we will stick to hockey on this podcast. But
once again, Scott has been there. He's now a Celtics reporter, so.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
And he has been chanting "F you, Kyrie" every game.
Yeah,
so
I keep getting kicked out of the press box.
Yeah, so I've heard. I actually
really, they're not giving you high fives for that up in the press box.
I heard on the radio that Kyrie was going back with some fan in game one, back and forth. It may have been you, Scott. I don't know.
If you look closely at the replay, yes.
I'm not sure I'm sitting quite close enough for him to hear me. I am in the back row of level 9, so
Okay. Yeah.
I can be loud. I don't know about that loud though.
I guess that's tough. Yeah. Well, look, there's always things Bruins to talk about, and of course, like we said last episode, we have the draft coming up at the end of the month. We have free agency less than a month away. So I guess let's jump right into the opening shifts. And Scott, why don't we go to you and see what you're thinking? You have a possible name you want to float out there.
Yeah, so when we were doing the mailbag questions, I came up with a list of names, and we didn't go through all of them because, you can kind of play that game all day. But one I did want to bring up because I saw someone write about it in the Hockey News. So I'll give them credit. It was Michael DeRosa, but it was an idea that I was already thinking of, and it's Brock Nelson, center of the New York Islanders. 32 years old, has 1 year left on his contract, $6 million cap hit. I don't know if the Islanders are thinking about moving him or what, but obviously there is a contract coming up there. The Islanders feel like a team that has to do something, and I know that that's very vague, but clearly the mix there has been a little off. They're not rebuilding, but they're not close enough to really being a cup team either. So they only have about $6 million in cap space this offseason, so they don't have a ton of money to play with. So I just kind of feel like there's a lot of different things that could be on the table for them. And they have their number one center with Bo Horvat. So Brock Nelson is, I think a really nice number 2 center. I would have questions about him as a true number 1. He doesn't really play huge minutes. He's usually in kind of the 18-minute neighborhood. But his last 3 seasons, 37 goals, 36 goals, 34 goals. He knows how to score. 75 points in 22-23, 69 points, nice, this past season.
No, so Scott, no. Someone has to say something, all right?
There's some real production there that at least kind of makes him intriguing to me. I don't know what it would take to get him. I know the Islanders really like him. He's been a team leader type for them. But like I said, I've always liked Brock Nelson. I don't know that I love him as a number 1 center option. But as we've covered a lot, there really isn't a perfect option. So if you're kind of looking for what's something that can, make us better, doesn't come with a long-term commitment up front, obviously you can explore re-signing them. So just think that's an interesting name. Elliot Friedman mentioned on 32 Thoughts last week or the week before that he could be a player the Islanders entertain moving, so it's not coming completely out of the blue. So just kind of wanted to throw him out there.
I'm just a little bit disappointed in you that you thought you could sneak in nice and have no one notice.
Listen, Bridget, I got points to make, okay? I can't just pause and wait for someone else to jump in.
Rolled right through it.
Well, I thought he was referring to the point total. I'm not sure.
Yeah, he said 69 points. Nice.
Yeah,
that's a nice point total. It's not exceptional. So I'm not gonna say it's great.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. It's just nice.
All right.
So Scott, maybe I don't see us really spending a ton of time on Nelson later in the podcast. So I guess I'll just ask you now. before I go to my opening shift. Is this something where I hear his name and I'm with you? Like he's a good name, but he's not an ideal guy to be a number one center. Yes, 75 points 2 seasons ago, 69 points last year is good, but just not that bona fide number one center. But to your point, the Bruins, beggars can't be choosers at times. So I view him as like maybe like a last ditch effort if you don't find what you're looking for in the offseason. But can it work that way? Like can the Bruins get to a point where they're left with nothing? Like when do you make that decision to, okay, we didn't find what we were looking for, now we go after him, and would he even be available? Is there a certain point in the summer where maybe they're out of luck if they don't strike earlier?
Well, and that's where it gets complicated, because I think you're right that there's other options you'd want to explore before Brock Nelson. But if the Islanders are at all considering moving him, like they probably want to get that done soon, because then they want to make their other moves with whatever money they free up. So, I don't really think it can work where it's like, okay, well, hey, we'll talk to the Islanders, later in July sometime if we haven't figured something out. Like, no, the Islanders are already going to be set at that point, either keeping them or already having moved them. Which is, I think, listen, it's funny because like we come on here and we record and there's not a whole lot of new stuff going on. And there probably won't be until we get to kind of that last week of June. But Don Sweeney is doing work. Like they're exploring every option right now, even though nothing has come to fruition yet. So I would think Don Sweeney's going to know by the draft, certainly by July 1st, like, hey, either this better option is realistic for us or it's not. So he's going to know by then if he has to turn to something like a Brock Nelson, like if he's going to have to be that far down the list.
But I mean,
their timeline is different than ours. Like we think get to the draft, get to July 1st, and then maybe reevaluate a week or two in. The Bruins are already going through option A, B, C, D, and E. And like they're gonna know by July 1st if Brock Nelson might be the best they can do at center, or if free agent or trade target X is in play for them.
Yeah, and Brock Nelson, his numbers from the last 2 seasons are actually pretty good. Like last season he had 75 points. This most recent season he had 69 points, like Scott said, which would have put him, second in Bruins points. So he has more. Last season he had more points than any of the other Bruins centers did. Just to put that out there. But he also is 32 though, and I feel like their higher options are probably guys that stick around a little bit longer, that are maybe in their mid to late 20s would be the ideal situation for the Bruins, and that's why they're looking into other guys. It seems like pretty hard, like Martin Necas. So, which Brian kind of leads to your opening shift.
Yeah, and obviously Scott, just to reiterate, like you're not bringing up Brock Nelson as your ideal candidate. You're bringing him up as an interesting name, and that's exactly what he is. But Bridget, to my opening shift, once again, I'm going to reference 32 Thoughts podcast. They recently, on their most recent episode, were talking about the Carolina Hurricanes and the situation that the new general manager is in, as it pertains to Martin Necas. And Necas hasn't said anything publicly about not wanting to play in Carolina going forward, but he's made it abundantly clear privately to the Hurricanes that he would like to move on. So the Hurricanes have made this, it's at the top of their list, I think, right now, is to try to move him. The Hurricanes have talked to certain teams and said to them, you have something that we're interested in. And the Hurricanes have talked to other teams saying, you don't have what we're looking for. But what they talked about on 32 Thoughts is that the Hurricanes are now recircling the well and going back to teams that previously they told you don't have what we're looking for, and telling those teams we can get creative here with potentially a 3-team deal. So, I only bring this up because it's kind of a dry time of the year for hockey news, but also it does involve the Bruins potentially, because it has been reported the Bruins are one of the teams that have been interested in Necas. And it seems to me, Scott and Bridget, that the Hurricanes are dealing from a position where they don't have a ton of leverage. You have a player who wants out, and I think they have to do what they have to do, and that could include maybe not getting as much as they want.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. If you're recircling, the well, like you said, Brian, sometimes that means you didn't find the right option the first time around. Maybe there's not an obvious fit for them, and not an obvious target. And like you said, Scott, maybe Allmark wasn't enough, but the Bruins weren't willing to give up more or something like that. Like whatever conversations they more than likely had with Boston, maybe the first time around Carolina didn't think that they're getting a fair deal from it. But maybe now that they've seen what their options were, it changes their expectations, changes the market. And we've talked about this before too. I think Allmark doesn't, I don't think his no trade list includes Carolina. I think he'd be able to go there. But with a 3-team deal, correct me if I'm wrong, that means you could try to kind of find a way around it if you were sending Allmark to somewhere else and there was assets going to Carolina and then Nate just going to Boston from whatever that third team was. So just interesting that they're willing to get creative. But to the actual player, we've talked quite a bit about what makes him appealing to Boston, and he's a 25-year-old center, another Czech guy, so he might be able to fit right in.
Maybe center.
Yeah, okay. So
very skeptical.
Winger says, but they still need a top 6 player, right? Like now they need a center more, but if DeBrusk leaves, like you lost another winger, and you're needing to add to your top 6 in some way.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely read this as Carolina hasn't found the holy grail package they were looking for, and I didn't really expect them to get that. Like we talked about on the last episode where it was Friedman, also on 32 Thoughts, who reported that the Canucks didn't think they were going to be able to meet Carolina's price, and he mentioned that it was like Philip Roenick and like 2 top prospects, and it was like, I can't imagine Carolina getting that for Necas. Like, yes, he's a good, young, talented player, but he also wants out, and he's a restricted free agent who needs a new contract. It's not like he's already under contract, so that it's just it's a tough position to deal from if you're Carolina. Like I never really thought. Look, they haven't made the trade yet, so maybe they do end up finding a great package out there. But I never really thought for a restricted free agent that they were going to be able to get, that kind of haul. And, so that going off like Friedman's asking price to Vancouver, that's what made me think that, Allmark straight up probably wouldn't be enough to meet the initial ask. But if Carolina's not finding their initial ask out there, maybe Allmark straight up or Allmark plus a little bit, but not plus, another premium asset. Maybe that is enough now. So yeah, remember the last episode we did too, we mentioned that I think it was Frank Saravalli had the report that, a Necas trade might happen before game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals.
Yeah.
And that obviously didn't happen. So
yeah, it sounded like there was a lot of like momentum to get something done like this past week. And obviously now we're in game 2. So like, and now then with the 32 Thoughts, like the update, it sounds like it's gone cold, right? Whatever might've been hot at that point, maybe went cold, and now they're doing the whole circle back.
Yeah. I don't know if it went cold or like what's hot. I think it was I think it was Carolina wanted to give off the impression that it was hot, that something was close, and you try to put pressure on teams to make, oh, hey, give us your one last bid to blow us away. And then they don't get blown away, and now it's like, hey, so yeah, how about that guy we're talking about in that second round pick? We might be a little more open to that now. Like that's how I see that. It's like they tried to put some pressure on teams, and no one fell for it, and now Carolina kind of has to regroup a little, is what it seems like.
It's like a breakup that you try to reverse. It's like, I was just kidding. Let's go out Friday. I wasn't serious about it.
One thing's for certain is that whatever Carolina ends up doing, I don't see it happening after the draft. I think I view draft weekend as the absolute latest that something would go down. I'm a little surprised. I mean, there was obviously a report recently that a deal was potentially expected as early as game 1 of the finals. Clearly that didn't happen. So, and I wasn't too surprised about that. That was just a random, speculative report. But, I wouldn't be surprised if something happened before the draft. I think because, like I said, I think draft weekend is the absolute latest if you're Carolina trying to get something for them, especially with 3 teams involved potentially.
Yeah, because somebody's probably trading draft picks. So, like, if it's a 3-team deal, usually there's all sorts of stuff circling. And you're probably, you potentially cut out different teams' ability to give you what you want if you go after the draft, right? Like, say you wanted Allmark and I know the Bruins don't have many draft picks, but they're able to give you something. Like, the Bruins are a bad example, but say Vancouver or someone like that's a move, a piece that sweetens the deal that's not available if you're past draft day. So unless it's a draft pick for years to come.
And I just want to make a quick PSA to the listeners, but more specifically and more importantly, Bridget and Scott, as it pertains to this recording. I am absolutely battling some Wi-Fi issues right now. Like, it keeps kicking me off networks and whatnot. So if I go glitchy or if my screen goes black or whatever, just know that it's, I'm battling back here. I really am. So
it's mostly been good, Brian. So you've been battling pretty hard, and yeah. So do you want me to go to my shift then, and then we can circle back to some of the talks about trades and different things, and also a little bit about the finals. Brian has a fashion segment, so hopefully his internet's better for that. So
I hope so.
Yeah, we gotta, otherwise we can't do the segment. So I can't really provide the same kind of analysis as Brian.
I'll drive to Attleboro, and if I have to get onto your Wi-Fi network, or actually Lowell will be quicker actually for me. So for me.
All right, so I will go to my opening shift while Brian gets situated. And so mine isn't really hockey related at all. And I didn't know if I should say it or not, but it seems like everybody else is kind of coming out and saying that obviously Jack's job is open after he retired at the end of this past season. I know a lot of people applied, and I was like, okay, well, I can't just not apply. I have to put my name in. So I sent everything I needed to send in. And so did pretty much everyone and their brother, but I know there was over 100 applicants. Which is not surprising. It's a very highly sought after job. So I put my name in for it, and I'm not overly optimistic, but I just figured I'd put it out there because pretty much everyone else did. So yeah, I applied for Jack's job. I don't think I'm going to get it, guys. So I think I'm probably going to be with you guys for a little bit longer, so you don't have to worry about that. But it was interesting because I saw other people apply, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm more qualified than that person. Okay, I'm more qualified. And then I was like, why am I not applying? So I did.
Yeah, I'm sure they get like a million applicants, but yeah, you don't know unless you apply. Like, all they can do is say no. And Bridget downplays herself, but like, you do have an impressive resume, and you've done a lot of play-by-play, and you're good at it. So
thank you. Sometimes, occasionally, Scott says some nice things.
Yeah, that's the one. You don't get another until the fall. So.
Guys,
even the last 5-6 months, Bridget, with the women's bean pod and the PWHL, right? So like Michael Scott once said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky - Michael Scott. So
yeah, no, I worked with the Bruins producers during the bean pot, the women's bean pot. Did a lot of work with the PWHL. Obviously that's a different level than college hockey. The productions were like insanely complex, and so I do think I have enough experience to do the job. I just know there are other people that are very, very qualified and very good. So
we know you don't have to compete with Dave Gosher. He took himself out of the running. So
yep. I have a few colleagues at Hockey East that also are in the mix. So
Brian applied. He just sent them a fashion segment though, so I don't know if that's going to help him a ton.
Yeah. We'll send him this episode. We'll send him Brian's fashion segment from this episort.
Oh gosh, yeah.
He's hearing half the things, but he heard that.
Yeah, I heard fat shit set. Yeah, that's all I heard.
Yeah.
So I knew what you guys were talking about. But yeah, no, Bridget, it's absolutely like you have to go to bat for yourself, right? Especially that's the name of the game, so you never know.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts on that before we head to the Stanley Cup Finals, and some thoughts on that? Scott, I know you had some opinions on the makeup of the Panthers and where the Bruins directionally are heading, and if they have a head start on the rest of the league.
Yeah, so obviously Panthers are now up 2-0 in the Stanley Cup Final as we record. It's just really impressive to see them continue to do what they've done to everyone else, now do it against the Oilers, which is they just take away chances so well. They just don't give up much at all. Oilers last night, 19 shots on goal for the game. Through 2 periods, they only had 7. And it's like, we saw them do that to the Bruins, right? Where you come away and you're like, how do they only get 3 shots, 4 shots that period? And you think, well, a team like the Oilers, surely they're going to get more. Like, look at all the offensive talent they have. They have way more on offense than the Bruins do. They'll get chances. And then they still aren't getting chances. Like, the Panthers are just... We talk so much about their physicality and their forecheck, and that's a big part of it because that gets them control in the offensive zone. But it's also just team defense, just structurally. Like, they're so sound, and they're really clicking on all cylinders. Unlike last year, to this point, they've been pretty healthy, whereas last year, by the time they got to the Cup Finals, they were totally banged up and really didn't have a chance against Vegas. Now, they did lose Alexander Barkov late in that game to an elbow to the face from Leon Draisaitl. So we'll see where that ends up. We know, when Brad Marchand was in concussion protocol, he missed 2 games. So if Barkov's in concussion protocol, you wonder if, is he going to be out at least 1, maybe the next 2 games out in Edmonton. So, but yeah, I guess my overarching thought here is, I think as people focus on the Bruins, we already felt like the Panthers were, this team that you have to target and try to build a team that can beat that team. Like you have to, you never want to totally mold what you're doing to one specific opponent. But in this case, it kind of really does feel like you have to. Like, the Panthers aren't going anywhere. Yeah, there's going to be some turnover. There always is. But they don't have a ton of free agents. They have some money. So, like, they can mostly keep that team together. You're going to have to find a way to beat them. And now it feels like, it kind of feels like the whole league is sort of waking up to this, where it's like, yeah, the Rangers were cruising, and then they get punched in the face by the Panthers and didn't really have an answer. Oilers, finally looks like, hey, this is as good a chance as they've had, obviously, during McDavid's career. And now here they are in the finals, and they can't create anything against the Panthers. So it's like everyone's facing the same problem, because I think the Panthers I know they need to win 2 more games, but they're really planting their flag as the team to beat in the NHL. And it really kind of just reinforces what the Bruins need to do, which is find a way to build a team that can beat this team 4 times in a 7-game series.
Yeah, and I was talking to someone about this maybe like 2-3 weeks ago, that we may have actually seen the closest series, or like the team play them the best. It's kind of hard to believe it because the Bruins lost a series, but like they had a better idea, I think, of how to handle Florida from because the previous season, and everybody else seemed to not handle it well either. So um, you know, Bruins get knocked out by Florida, but they at least had a little bit of fight in them. Whereas so far, the Oilers just seem so frustrated, and they just, it's a Stanley Cup Final matchup that really wasn't made for them. And you talk about them not getting a lot of shots, even though they have some of the best goal scorers in the league. Well, Florida just doesn't allow the opportunities to even open up. Like the pass doesn't get there, or you're completely boxed out to a point where shooting doesn't make sense because you're not in a good area in the ice to score, and there's so much that goes into it that is frustrating from their game. And when you never let McDavid or Draisaitl get to their game, like especially early, the frustration sinks in and you see it. And, it's a mental game they play too. It takes away confidence. And really, when you're building a team to try to beat the Panthers, you feel like you have to fight fire with fire, right? Clearly, some of these skilled players are not getting any space. So if you're trying to beat them at their own game, personnel changes would need to happen, because you're looking at a team that has some tough players, big players. Um, you know, they have one of the best centers. They just don't allow you to have much space there. Their personnel is definitely, it seems like, as a team, above pretty much everyone else, and that's why they are where they are.
Yeah, guys, I have to be honest. I mean, two things have been my biggest takeaways with the Florida Panthers. Number one, Barkov is, he's this generation's, Bergeron, Kopitar, just absolute dynamic two-way centerman. And I think he's the best two-way player in the game right now. And I think that, he'll have some Selke trophies to back that up. Maybe Bergeron trophies in the future. But my biggest takeaway is what an amazing story and shutdown defenseman Gustav Forsling is. Just amazing. Seemingly came out of nowhere. He's a 126th overall draft pick in 2014, 5th round. So he's been around for a while. Like it's not like he's one of these players who just got drafted a few years ago and is like coming onto this. No, he's been around. I think his first season with Chicago was 2016-17. So it's like he's been around for a while, and now he's just bursted onto the scene, and he is just an elite shutdown defenseman.
Yeah, and I was watching. I remember right before the playoffs started, like playoff eve. NHL Network did a whole segment about how he's one of the most underrated defensemen in the league, and that he was going to be an X factor in the playoffs, and that was very accurate.
Yeah, and I guess if there's a lesson there, it's trying to bet on talent and athleticism, even if it hasn't panned out yet. Being patient with development time, because the one thing Gustav Forsling always had is, like, everywhere he's been, there's been talk that he's a workout warrior. He's in incredible shape. He's an amazing athlete, really good skater, but just clearly never could put together the complete package elsewhere. And the Panthers, through, I would say a combination of coaching, development, and patience, now have that complete package where he now has the game and the hockey smarts to match that athleticism and kind of that, part God-given gift, part just, him working out and training that way. Now it's finally all coming together. So, I guess, if you're trying to take something away, I think teams are always looking for those kind of guys of, okay, well, maybe it hasn't worked out somewhere else, but we see stuff that you can't teach, whether it's skating ability or physicality or size, stamina, whatever it might be, things that stand out maybe above other players, and you say, okay, well, let's take hey, we don't have to pay a ton of money for him right now. Let's take a chance on him, bring him in, and see if we can get out of him what some other organization wasn't able to. And you're always looking for that. Again, not that like I'm making a direct 1-for-1 comparison because this player isn't on Forsling's level, but it's like what the Bruins did with Justin Brazeau, where it's like there's a clear skill set there that hasn't panned out, size that you can't teach. And you say, well, let's bring him in and see if we can get more out of him. And like in that case, the Bruins now have an NHL forward, and we'll see if Brazeau becomes more than that. But like that's like the kind of chance that I'm talking about, where it's like, well, there's something there. Teams and maybe the player himself hasn't been able to fully put it all together yet, but let's see if we can do a better job.
Yeah,
it's
he's
really
only
crazy,
27.
guys. Yeah, he's only 27, and I mentioned it a minute ago. He was drafted in the 5th round in 2014, not by the Chicago Blackhawks, but by the Vancouver Canucks, and they traded his rights to the Blackhawks in January of 2015 for Adam Clendening. It's just
legend.
And then he obviously, he's in. So
he actually just left me. Yeah.
So the Canucks kind of fumbled the bag on, maybe not. I mean, I don't know. I mean, just not really developing or giving a 5th round pick a chance in the organization. You kind of go for, at the time, it was a NHL ready player. And then the Blackhawks have him for 3 years, and then he goes to Florida. And as Bridget says, he's 27 years old now. And I think he is going to be, probably the premier shutdown defenseman in the National Hockey League for the next, 5 to 7 years at least. And so, doesn't play the same way, not the same size, but in the same way that, Zdeno Chara was looked at as like the premier shutdown defenseman in the NHL during his, certainly the second half of his career. I think, Forsling I think he'll hold that title, like I said, for the next handful of seasons. He has the smarts and the ability to close gaps and shut down plays and like Nicholas Lindstrom did. Different types of skaters, and Lindstrom had a ton more offense to his game, but man, it's just really impressive what he has done. And yeah, I think the entire hockey world is noticing Forsling now if they hadn't before. I knew he was good. I didn't realize how good he was. And so that's my biggest takeaway. How does that correlate to the Bruins? It doesn't really. I mean, the Bruins, they have their top guys on the blue line, and none of them are exactly the same player as Forsling. But
the one way that it does is just that you have to game plan for him if you see him again.
Right.
You gotta know what you're going up against and try to get your top players away from him, or there's certain things you have to take into consideration when you go against him, because the advanced analytics for Forsling are, I'm sure Scott knows, are like ridiculously good. I mean, even the non-advanced stats, you can tell, he's plus minus isn't the best, but like plus 56, that's crazy good.
I mean, look who he's gone against, Bridget, in his 4 playoff rounds, right? Team by team. I mean, Tampa Bay in round 1, you have Stamkos and Kucherov and Point and others. Boston, obviously, Pasternak is, the guy, but Marchand and others. Panarin with the Rangers, Zibanejad, Kreider, and then, here come New Orleans in the Stanley Cup Finals, and McDavid and Draisaitl have literally, they had chances in game 1 for sure. But he smothers them. It's really impressive. It's really impressive. He's gone against the iron of the National Hockey League's elite players, I think, in all 4 rounds.
Yeah, and like that, it was probably underappreciated how, especially certain places locally, how good of a job he did against Pasternak. And it's like, yeah, we talk about Pasternak having, kind of a quiet series, and yes, Pasternak needs to be better and needed to do more, and you need more production from him. But it's like, you got to give some credit to Forsling. Like he had most of that matchup, and Brian, like as you've been saying, it's like he's doing it against everyone. So you can't, it's not like Pastrnak was going up against bums and like just not performing. He was going up against someone that maybe before that series, Bruins fans didn't fully recognize as an elite shutdown defenseman. But I think, now Forsling has been doing it all year. Like, listen, he was a Norris candidate. Like, I strongly considered giving him a vote. It didn't come out of nowhere. But like now that he's doing it round after round, it's like, okay, yeah, at some point, like you need to give him the credit he deserves. And for me to tie it to Bruins, like he's not going anywhere in future playoff matchups. He's going to continue to get the Pastrnak matchup. So it really highlights the need to have more scorers beyond Pastrnak. Like, yes, you want Pastrnak to do a better job in that matchup, and he has to figure out a way because he's a superstar, and superstars have to figure out a way. That's just part of the job. But you also want more options. Like, you want to have other guys who can step up. Maybe it's someone who isn't getting the Forsling matchup. Maybe it's a center or a wing who better helps Pastrnak win that matchup. Like, whatever it is, clearly you need more, which we already knew, but this just adds to it.
I mean, he's been surgical, and he does it so subtly. He's not having any bone crunching hits. He's not, having a ton of flashy plays. He just knows where to be on the ice, and he eliminates time and space. Like, in my opinion, no defenseman in the league is doing, as well as him right now. Obviously, this late in the season, I know there's only 2 teams left, but I think going forward as the Bruins play him, I mean, you won't see anybody more talented than McDavid or Draisaitl, right? And he's giving them fits. So I think the problem is when you have top players, they want the puck on their stick and they want to make plays crossing the blue line. And Forsling is it's a masterclass at, like I said, eliminating time and space. So no defenseman wants to turn around and retrieve the puck. So, probably a more meat and potatoes approach when he's on the ice, maybe just make him chase pucks and get after him because, when you're crossing the blue line with the puck in your stick, he's just really good at eliminating options. So in any event, the Panthers definitely seem to be the best team in the league this year. If the Oilers find a way to come back in the series, maybe take advantage of Barkov not being there, like you said, Scott. Maybe he's still playing. I don't know, but through Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Finals, the Panthers, they seem to have it all clicking.
Yeah, but one last point I would make on Forsling too, because you mentioned it. He's not. He can throw a hit, but he's not overly physical. He does kind of buck some of the trends of like. I've made this point forever, but people confuse physicality and good defense, and sometimes they're synonymous, but not always. And Forsling's not super physical. He's also 6 foot flat. Like he's not a big guy. He's under 200 pounds. So again, like he also, for everyone who like, clearly there's been a trend in recent years of teams and especially Stanley Cup winning teams building bigger back lines, sometimes more physical, but sometimes just bigger mobile back lines. And Forsling definitely has the mobility, but he's not a super big guy. So again, like there's still reason to believe that, you don't have to be 6'4", 220 to be a great NHL defenseman.
Yeah, I mean, his skating is elite. His center of gravity is clearly very strong. And you're right, Scott. He doesn't, while he's capable of making a good hit here and there, what he does really well is he gets in front of guys. Like he just gets his body in front of you, and he has the skating ability to just, it's a nightmare for players. So it's been really impressive to watch. Bridget, I did have a fashion segment, but we haven't had your input in a little bit, so I don't want to go ahead too early here.
No, that's all right. I had pretty much finished my thoughts on Forsling, and the only other thing I wanted to add before, if we're finishing off with the fashion segment, would be that since the last recording that we did, the Boston and Montreal were announced as the Four Nations, the 2 locations for the Four Nations tournament. That's going to be next February. So they're doing it like the first few games are at the Bell Center, and then the finals are in Boston. So Hopefully we're there for that. I don't know if maybe Scott and I make the trip to Montreal again. Brian, you can come if you want. We do
I'll see you guys in Boston.
Yeah. So, we're excited about that. That's coming up in February. It's Canada, USA, Sweden, and Finland. Pasta is a little bit salty that the Czech Republic isn't in it. I did like it better when it was, more countries in Europe were involved in past iterations of this kind of tournament. So, either way, I'd be excited to see some of those players come to Boston. And if you're a fan and you want to see Connor McDavid, you get another chance to see him come around, and whomever your favorite player might be from those 4 countries, you get a chance to watch them play in Boston. So
yeah, and obviously there'll be some Swedish players from the Bruins on that team as well, with Hampus Lindholm, and we think Linus Ullmark's getting traded, but he'll be on Team Sweden, probably. I'm going to guess split time with Jacob Markstrom, who, before we get to freshman segment, I do want to bring up Markstrom and Ullmark because there's a little bit there. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the 4 Nations just because it's a return of best on best international hockey that we just haven't had in way too long.
Yeah, I know. Really, that's why we love the Olympics.
Yeah, really, since the 2016 World Cup of Hockey, we haven't had this. So obviously this is only a warm-up for the Olympics, and in 2026, which will finally have all the NHL players back in it. And yes, we wish this was bigger, and having Czech Republic with Pastrnak playing in Boston would be awesome. But, this is a small tournament.
Can we get him a U.S. citizenship?
Wrapped up in 8 days. So
he has U.S. citizenship, right? Can we get him on Team USA? Can we maybe get him? I don't know. Maybe not, because I don't think he's married yet. But
guys, I don't think he's gonna trade teams after.
Come on.
After the heroes welcome he just got across the Czech Republic.
But he wants to play. So.
Guys, this tournament is so short, in fact, that I don't even know if there's a semifinal. Well, I don't even know if there's like a semifinal / consolation game.
Not.
Yeah, it's so. These first 4 games are in Montreal. Canada versus Sweden, US versus Finland, Finland versus Sweden, and USA versus Canada. So the US-Canada matchup will be in Montreal. Then you have Canada versus Finland at the Garden, and Sweden versus the USA at the Garden, and then the championship game. So it's just going to be the top 2 teams from that round robin, and then it's back to NHL play. So it's a very quick tournament.
Yeah, I mean, it's very not quick. Even really it's almost not even a tournament in that way, like that there's not multiple rounds of like it's just like a winner, like a championship. But I'll take whatever I can get. I'm not gonna lie, I'll take whatever I can get. I want to see these guys play together. I'm so ready for the Olympics. It's not even funny. I've been looking into Airbnbs and everything, trying to figure out details. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna go either way, because I mean, I'm sure I probably could get a credential, and also I just like Italy, and I've always wanted to go to the Olympics. So even if I'm not broadcasting or anything, I want to go. So I'm excited. It's 2 years away still, but you can't keep me away from Olympics that are in Italy. So
yeah, that I can't wait for the Olympics. But yes, in the 1 year in between, though, I'll gladly take this 4 Nations Cup to kind of whet the appetite, and hopefully, with all due respect to Sweden and Finland, hopefully we get a USA-Canada rematch in that gold medal game or championship game or whatever they're calling it at the Garden, because that really is the premier matchup that everyone wants to see. And Brian, as you mentioned, the first game in the round robin portion of it between US and Canada is going to be in Montreal. So, but yeah, I mean, those rosters are going to be stacked.
I mean, Swayman, I have to assume Swayman is going to be getting some playing time for USA.
Yeah, I mean, US is loaded at goalie, but yeah, he's certainly in the conversation. Like, Hellebuck's probably the number 1. Jake Ottinger is in there. Thatcher Demko.
These are all Hockey East guys.
Yes.
Gotta give them the props, because a lot of great goalies came from Hockey East that are American-born goalies.
Mm-hmm.
You had thoughts on goaltending, Scott. Maybe it's a good segue.
Yeah. Now I'm trying to pull up the report. But there was a report just in the last couple of days that the Devils are still trying to get Jacob Markstrom from Calgary. Ottawa also mentioned, which isn't surprising. Those are two teams we've heard mentioned for Ullmark. So it's like those seem to be the two teams that are most aggressively going after a goalie and not hiding the fact that they're going after a goalie. It does seem clear that the Devils at least are prioritizing Markstrom. It's like every report seems to be they're going after Markstrom and they're also interested in Ullmark, where it's like Ullmark clearly seems to be option 2 for them.
That doesn't make sense to me too much.
So I get it from the standpoint of Markstrom has been a legit number 1 who's had 60 starts. So like at least from a workload perspective, Markstrom's done it and been a workhorse, and Ullmark still really hasn't done that. So I get that. And then Markstrom's analytics are extremely good. Like, he was on a bad team, obviously, but he still holds up. Like, the underlying numbers still say that's a really good goalie. So I kind of get it. To me, I don't think there's a huge difference between them. So, but yeah, it feels like, kind of feels like whichever one of them doesn't get Markstrom immediately pivots to Ullmark. And of course, that comes back to, would Ullmark go to Ottawa? Like, are they on his no trade list? New Jersey, we think he'd probably go to. That seems like a good situation. But yeah, again, like, we're at least starting to get to the point here where it's like, okay, things actually do have to happen, because, draft is what, June 28th or 29th, I think is the first night of it. It's just over 2 weeks away now. So it's not so far off in the future where it's like, oh, there's a ton of time to figure that out. Like, we think one or both of those trades happen before the draft. So you're getting into that range now where it's like, okay, it's time for teams to like actually make serious offers and get down to finalizing deals.
I'd kind of be shocked if Ullmark's back, but like, what can you do if that's not really what other teams are, are targeting? And if he doesn't want to go to Ottawa, like, you're once again kind of stuck in the same position you were at the deadline. Like, there is a world in which that could crop back up. And maybe you end up with both those goalies again this year, though. I think we're all in agreement that the need for other positions is much higher. And that's why the move would make sense.
Yeah, I can't see a world where he doesn't get moved. Someone's gonna want him.
Someone's gonna want him, and I don't know if the Bruins feel this way or Don Sweeney feels. Obviously, he would never say it publicly, but I feel like they should be more willing to take whatever they can get, because like now I think it's clear that Swayman's your guy. That $5 million can help you improve elsewhere, and the improvements you make elsewhere help your team more than keeping the goalie rotation or this goalie tandem in place.
Yeah, and if you don't trade him next, like this offseason up to the trade deadline, you're losing him for nothing. Whereas you probably, like, this is your not your last chance, because if you trade him at the deadline, that would be your last chance to try to get something for him before his contract is over.
Right. So like, whereas, especially last summer, but even at the trade deadline, I was more in the boat of, don't trade him just to trade him. Trade him if you get, a really good offer that you can't pass up. At least for me, like, I'm now much more at a point where it's, yeah, listen, you want to play teams off each other and you want to get the most you possibly can, but ultimately the upside just in moving him and taking whatever you can get, that $5 million is still like a clear plus that helps you going into this season. To me, more than having Ullmark back would.
All right, Brian, you know what that means.
Quack. Quack.
Of course.
Quack. 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 Guys, quack with me here, huh? So look, finally, I know Scott likes to quack. He quacks, sometimes when he's just chilling at home. He's a big quacker. Just quacking at Kyrie at the Garden. Oh yeah.
Nobody knows why.
Kyrie's throwing a free throw. He just hears from 200 feet in the air from the 9th floor. Somebody quacking up there. But so there's this Twitter account called Aesthetics, and they're very, very legitimate. They're plugged in with the National Hockey League, and their report has also been confirmed by Greg Wyshynski of ESPN. But he put out a tweet that says he can confirm that the Kings and the Ducks will have new uniforms and new primary logos next season. Goes on to say, I got to look at both logos and can say this. The Ducks is a modernized version of the Mighty Ducks logo in orange, black, and gold. Kings is a modernized version of the Gretzky era logo in black and silver with a new crown design inside. Haven't seen the jerseys yet. So I would imagine that by the draft, these would be debuted. You guys know me. I would just love them to go back to the Paul Kariya colors. But if they're going back to some version of the Mighty Ducks uniforms and it's in their current colors, that's totally fine too. Beggars can't be choosers. I mean, what they've been wearing for the last decade with a webbed D on the crest with the most bizarre, unsynchronized, random stripe and pipe patterns on their socks and their jerseys have been, I think, some of the worst uniforms in all of professional sports. When they used to have some of the best. So this is great news for uniform nerds like myself.
This would be Brian's job if he could. If he could be the insider on and knowing all the jerseys. Even if he could just be the jersey designer for someone, that would be his ideal job.
Yeah, I mean every NHL video game I had growing up was you play the game for the first couple of weeks and then you just get bored. You just want to start creating uniforms. So I mean, when I was born, I would
just create big fat players and throw them out there and just have the funniest looking team.
Oh God! But look, Bridget, you mean I was born in '93. I think Scott was around there, maybe a little bit earlier. Bridget, maybe a little bit later. But I grew up with the Mighty Ducks
2001
movies.
For me.
Yes,
you were born in 2001. Okay.
Yeah, no, I didn't say graduate high school. I said when you were born. But yeah, I grew up on those Mighty Ducks jerseys, and it was my favorite team growing up because of the movies and the uniform. So, when they in 2007 when they had the rebrand, and it was like the black jerseys that said Ducks. It was like the Pronger Niedermeyer Cup team with Getzlaff and Perry. Look, it was a totally different jersey from what I grew up watching, but it wasn't it was different, but it was tolerable. But since then, it's just regress to a point where it's what the hell is this? And the last couple of years, they've just been teasing people with these reverse retros and stuff. It's just go back to, and there was this misconception that Disney still owns the Mighty Duck logo. It's not true. Disney sold the rights to that logo when they sold the team. So they've been able to use that logo since they sold. They just haven't. And so, and also the Kings jerseys, the Gretzky era jerseys are awesome. So I think the LA Kings uniforms aren't as bad right now as the Ducks uniforms, but anyway, Southern California is getting a redesign.
Every fashion segment feels like it's about the Ducks uniforms, right? I say 75%.
Make the change. There's been a lot of teams in the last 5-6 years that had terrible jerseys from the Reebok takeover in 06-07. Guys, don't look too long ago, but the Flames and the Oilers had some putrid uniforms. The Senators, all those teams have gone back to their really solid retro looks. And there's some other teams in there as well. So I think I would say 95+% of the league's jerseys right now are really, really good. There's just a couple that had to change. I mean, before they went to Utah, the Coyotes were another one. They were terrible. Then they went back to the Kachinas, and those are great. Now they're in Utah, so I don't know what the hell they're going to be wearing.
Well, we don't
But
even
the
know
Ducks are
what
the
their
last.
mascot is.
The Ducks were the last one. Just like one of the last ones that had to make a change. I think the Capitals still have to make a change. Maybe the Blue Jackets, but we're getting there. Slow and steady wins the race.
And we all know your thoughts about the Centennials. So,
that's in the past. I'm like Rafiki from The Lion King. It doesn't matter. It's in the past. I'm not going back. I'm not going back to last year. We're moving forward here.
Bring back the Pooh Bears. Bring back
the Kings jerseys were more just bland. That the Ducks were actively awful. So yeah, Brian, like obviously I'm with you. Like I wish they would just go back to the purple and teal colors, like bring the whole thing back. But at least if you're going, even if you're keeping the current colors, that it's a step in the right direction to go back to the old design at least. And the Kings should also be better. So totally with you on that. Capitals aren't going to change until Ovechkin retires. They're just, they got to ride that. It was like the Patriots with the Brady era jerseys. Like, I hated those Patriots jerseys for a long time, but it's the Brady era. So you can't change him while he's still playing. So, you got to wait for your legend to retire.
We're getting older, guys, when the 90s are now retro uniforms. So that's what we're looking at now, but gotta love it. Bridget, I know you have to go. So
I just want to say one more thing before I go, because I was thinking about this. My opening shift was about like me applying to Jack's job, and I was thinking maybe people have no idea what I do outside of this that are our listeners. So I'll link the reel that I sent. So if you're like wondering what would qualify me this whole time, like she just talks like she's just on a podcast. Like no, I have several other jobs. So I worked 6 jobs this last season. So
well, Bridget, instead of tweeting that out, I mean, we might record an episode next week while you're on vacation. You can like just cut the reel up and we can just plug that in and have that be the Bridget portion of next week's podcast.
Well, no, I was thinking I'm going to just put the link in the YouTube video. And we don't need to do that. You can watch it if you want. We don't want to force it on people.
You know what I'm thinking? Bridget was kind enough to make these Scott's Pops buttons. Scott, yeah. I think you return the favor and you make Bridget proof for broadcaster buttons or logos, and we'll start politically campaigning for her.
Stickers, yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, Bridget has a heart out here, so I think I know her feelings on it. She likes the uniform upgrades as well. So quack, quack, quack. Thank you all for listening. Bridget, enjoy your vacation, and we'll talk to you all very soon. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.